First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Hello, friends. Just me. No Mike. He quit the podcast, basically. I'm just kidding. No, he didn't. It is just me today. Well, me and a guest. So some time ago, I had worked on a project. It was my first time working on a project with an intimacy coordinator, and it was a super eye-opening experience, and honestly left much to be desired. And Alexis and I worked on a project together where we also struggled with some of the intimacy work, but not because of her. She's wonderful. And but there was a lot of factors, and it was the inspiration for today's episode because intimacy coordination, which through Alexis I learned, sort of really came into the zeitgeist in 2016, I guess because of an Alyssa Milano tweet. Right? Is that what Alexis said? Well, you'll listen and find out and tell me what she said. But that was sort of when we started really having some serious conversations about the need for the work. And subsequently, I would argue it's kind of blown up all over the specifically film, TV, stage industry, and opera, I imagine too, etc. And so with that come a lot of amazing new things and also some unique challenges. And so I wanted to sort of do a retrospective on the work and the moment we're in because of it, and try to better understand not only its value, but how we can continue to use it at its best, if that makes sense. And Alexis Black is the perfect person to have this conversation. She is a fight, movement, and intimacy director, performer, and theater educator. She's an assistant professor of movement at Michigan State University, a certified intimacy director and instructor with intimacy directors and coordinators, and a certified teacher in the Michael Chekhov physical acting technique. And she absolutely loves to research specificity, agency, and sustainability in physical storytelling. As a fight or intimacy director, she has worked regionally, international, off-Broadway, and on Broadway. She is the co-author of Supporting Staged Intimacy, a practical guide for theater creatives, managers, and crew for Routledge Publications. It came out in 2022. I loved the conversation. She's so smart. She's so empathetic. And honestly, it was just selfishly such a good conversation for me. I've been so curious and yeah, so enjoy, friends. I have this weird obsession because I'm right next to a window where I'm constantly being like, oh, I need more amber, I need more white. So distracted by Mike calls it my autism that kicks in when I start.
That's so funny because I was literally just doing that while you were talking. I was like adjusting these like random lamps that I've found to try to get a little more light, but
Alexa,
it is what it is.
I have 3 lights. I have 3 lights depending on like what I want more of. It's too much. It's too much. I don't need all these lights, but I already want to give myself a little more. Anyway, so I was joking before we even jumped on here that you are the busiest person in show business, but it's because, and it's, well, I don't know why. I mean, I think it's because people like you. You're good at what you do, but also, in this conversation today, as we talk specifically with the focus on intimacy, even though you, and we'll talk about this, dabble very much in all elements of that world, both in terms of fight and intimacy. And there's been a big push in this moment in the past, in a good way, I would argue, in the past decade, to really have more conversations about what this work is and how it is supportive of whatever creative medium. film, TV, opera, theater, whatever,
Mhm.
to I would argue to allow for more expression in a lot of ways, and safer expression at that. We'll get into all of that, but I want to go back to the beginning, Alexis. How did your journey? Well, I was going to ask you about fight into intimacy, but how did you even get into the world of fight and intimacy as something that was interesting to you?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Let's do the short one because I have so many questions for you.
Okay, great. I'll try and bring it all together. I mean, basically, I grew up doing theater. I grew up doing being in a ballet company, and I grew up doing sports like field hockey. And so when I went to school for acting in undergraduate and I found stage combat, I was like, this is like dance theater fighting. Like it was like everything I love all at once. And so that was my first introduction to physical storytelling. And then when I worked in New York City, a lot with the Vampire Cowboys Theater Company, Qui Gwynn, who is one of the founders and artistic directors and playwright, he was doing a lot more fight choreography at the time, and so he mentored me a lot in that storytelling and especially comedic fight choreography. And then I went to Virginia Commonwealth University to get a master's degree in movement pedagogy because I really wanted to become a movement teacher and dive even deeper into how expressive we are as human beings. I just love physical expression.
Yeah.
And through that experience, I worked with David Leong, who I've worked on almost 20 productions with. He's a fight master, a Broadway choreographer. So I learned so much there, of course. And then I started dabbling into things like viewpoint, Suzuki, Michael Chekhov physical acting
Just
method.
wrote down Michael Chekhov.
The Margolis method, love Carrie Margolis, and just all the different ways that there's so much nuance in our, we do dialogue in shows, but I love focusing on that, what I call physical text.
Yeah.
And being kind of a playwright of that in a way. As a choreographer, I find that, the moments when you're beyond talking, your character is to violence or to the intimacy we're going to talk about. I find that absolutely fascinating. So that's how I got there, because I didn't even know intimacy direction was a thing until 2016. And I started training in it at that point and worked with Intimacy Directors International and certified with them and intimacy directors and coordinators. And that has been, you said a decade a little bit ago. I was like, oh my gosh, it has been almost a decade, which is crazy.
Well, and I was more referencing when it was coming into my even awareness because,
Yep.
I don't know, old, I imagine we're around the same age. We don't need to talk about that. And, but when we were coming up, their fight was a thing. I think I told you, where I went to school with Dale Gerard. I don't know if you know Dale, but
Yeah.
We had 3 days a week. We were in that studio doing all kinds of fight work, and I will actually say I didn't know about your extensive physical background. To be honest with you, Alexis, meaning, I also was very much into viewpoints and Suzuki. I used to carry around Anne Bogart's book, And Then You Act, Making Art in an Unpredictable World, in my bag. I just loved that book. The physical world really unlocked my creativity. Otherwise, I kind of got stuck in my head. It was the place where I was able to free myself, and knowing that you have all that extensive knowledge. My gosh, what a no bullshit. Like I was gonna say what a gift, but almost low key, what a necessary gift to bring, especially to the process of intimacy, because it is so many things. It is feeling, it is psychological, it is historical, it is physical, it is all of it pushes boundaries. And so to have someone with perspective who understands and could maybe even create their own language of sorts based off of all that experience, I would argue is invaluable, and kind of goes back to my point as to why you're the gal about town. So the your journey then makes sense, how you were studying fight and then intimacy coordination, you said, was introduced to you in 2016. And pretty
Yes.
immediately, I would argue, because we'll talk about the book that you wrote, to have published a book in all these years in a short amount of time after even being introduced to a subject, what was it about the intimacy work that you were like, I want to, out of all of that work I've done, the movement pedagogy studies and the viewpoints in Suzuki, Michael Chekhov, etc., why fight and intimacy in particular?
Uh, well, honestly, it kind of started from moments where I, as a fight director, was asked to work on, we'll say, scenes of non-consensual intimacy,
Mm.
because there was, a slight overlap in that, oh, there's moments of violence here that are pure violence. There's moments that are intimate, non-consensual for these characters, and an assault, the story of an assault. And I felt at that time that I had the skills to do the fight part, but not to really help the actors as fully as I could with you were saying it can be psychological, it's emotional, with how to work with that as an actor, and then how to tell the best story as the character in a way that is readable to the audience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, actors can be feeling whatever they feel, the characters can be feeling whatever they feel, but if the audience can't read that in their physical text, then it's, quote, not happening.
Yeah.
Right. So I was really interested in finding ways to help actors be healthy in those moments. I mean, something you talked about you have in your, I don't want to say tagline for the podcast, maybe there's a better word for it, but your mission, part of that is just being sustainable as an actor. And I had spent time as an actor. I was in AEA, and I did tours and all this stuff for a little bit in New York as well. And I did a lot of scenes with fights and intimacy. And it did feel like, oh, here we have this system for fights, but for intimacy, just go in the other room and figure it out. We joke, it's like Nike intimacy, just do it. And so for me, that journey felt like I had that background in storytelling to help, but then I needed some more help with the process, the protocols, the how to best serve actors and make it sustainable to do these challenging moments where you're being really physical with a coworker, and it feels more real to actors in a certain way. Like, actors do have a little more physical comfort than in general. I don't say everyone does, but if you're doing a moment of violence, let's say that we're staging a stabbing, it's very technical. You're obviously not really stabbing someone. You actors get a little geeky about it. They're like, "Oh, where do I put my hand and how do we sell this magic trick?" Where in intimacy there are moments of magic tricks. So if we're simulating a sex act, obviously that's not really happening. So how do we hide that from the audience, mask it the same way you do a fight? But there are times where your lips are really touching another person's lips for an extended amount of time, and that's a sensory experience. And so I think in that way, it's nice to have more of a container around it so they can healthily step in and out of those moments.
And do you think, I mean, you're sort of speaking to it for your own realization of why you wanted to bring intimacy in, but was there a specific moment, or was there something that the industry was missing that ultimately sparked the rise of intimacy coordination?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I mean, if you're speaking about in 2016, when Alyssa Milano retweeted activist Tarana Burke's tweet that I think was actually from 2006. So 10 years after this tweet of hashtag Me Too, and people's experiences in the industry of being of abuse, of harassment in the entertainment industry. I think at that point there was a bit more of a focus on the film and TV world, but of course it was happening in live theater. And so that going viral really brought it to the attention that there needed to be change in the industry.
Wow.
And Tonya Sina actually first coined the terminology around staging intimacy in a thesis in 2006. So that also was 10 years in the making. And I think it was 2015, maybe 14, 15, where some intimacy organizations were starting to be formed. So people in the industry were aware that it was something that we needed to look more at, but that particularly that viral tweet, I think, was that tipping point or turning point for it to get national attention and really boost change in the industry.
And what have organizations, like you mentioned IDC, which you think is intimacy directors and coordinators, how have they helped to define and professionalize the field?
I mean, I think in just setting protocols, first for the people that they were working with, then for the theaters they were sending them to, and now within the industry itself. So I know that people from IDC and multiple other organizations worked with SAG-AFTRA to get protocols written into their processes and to unionize as intimacy coordinators has just occurred. So that is creating a professional standard. I know that they're trying to work with AEA right now to create the same. I've seen some contracts at equity theaters have specific clauses in them now. I'm not sure who all is creating those at that top level, but I think it was about getting together, listening to actors, listening to professionals, listening to choreographers, and finding those protocols and putting them into place.
And of course, you wrote a book. Well, you and Tina Newhouser.
Yeah.
You and Tina wrote this book specifically on staged intimacy, supporting staged intimacy, a practical guide for theater creatives, managers, and crew. Amazing. Yes. Mazel tov. That's huge. Truly. I mean, just any publish of any kind, but also, you know, I no bullshit. I'm actually quite moved by just like your commitment to the craft of moving us in a forward process, just to say. But what made you want to write the book? And are you already considering ways that you might want to update it?
Yes. You know, it's funny. We started writing it in 2020 and 2021. It published in 2022. And that's already 3 years ago. Like, I don't even know what's happening right now.
Crazy.
And it is a really evolving industry. So why did we want to write it? So we were at the time during COVID, there were a lot of online classes, one of which was through IDC that Tina is a professional stage manager. She's worked for decades, Broadway, corporate events, things like that as a stage manager. And she's amazing, the best of the best. And we created for IDC a online course called Stage Managing Intimacy because we had found, we both work at Michigan State University. We had found that our student stage managers needed some ideas about what was their role in the room with an intimacy director. And so we created a whole course specifically for stage managers. But what we discovered when we were teaching that course, which I think 500 or more people ended up taking over the multiple times that we did it, that other people were signing up for that were costume designers, were administrators at theaters, artistic directors. And there had been, publication, Staging Sex by Chelsea Pace, that was focused more for actors and perhaps choreographers. But what about everyone else in the room? And we thought they need this resource. It came from a place of just really wanting to help. And having done a lot of research through the lens of the stage manager ends up touching all of these, maybe I shouldn't say touching all these areas when we're talking about consent boundaries, but they interact with all the different areas of the production. So we started interviewing different practitioners, costume designers and lighting designers, sound designers, scenic, like how does this interact with all of these different areas, and what do they need to know that maybe isn't written down anywhere or isn't being presented to them when the focus is on actors and choreographers, which we get. But that's what we did. We decided to go from pre-production through the run of the show and give as much detail as we can. And I do recommend, if anyone wants to write a book or co-write a book, writing it with a stage manager is like the best experience.
It's
We
so
had
organized and
deadlines. We
efficient.
had organization. It was so amazing. And she really is a kind, thoughtful person. So it was just a lovely experience. And we do want to do a second edition at some point for sure.
Well, because the work is so new, so I imagine there's going to be all kinds of new considerations. I'm sure even since you've published it, you yourself have had many, realization of like, oh, I wonder how I could continue to adapt that. In what ways does your work, though, in fight choreography inform how you approach specifically staged intimacy?
Okay. I'm just writing down these questions when you ask them so I can have them in my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some similarities. Like I said, the transition is not seamless because there are those there are some things with, boundaries with advocacy that are different, a different relationship to the work, the context of it. But they're at the basic level, we are doing physical storytelling. We are creating moments where things are masked or there's a kind of magic trick that's hiding things. And some of the terminology really crosses over well. So you might remember from Viewpoints things like tempo and shape and duration and intensity of touch. And, I love soundscapes, with fights as well. And this is something that my mentor, David Leong, really talked about was, can the audience close their eyes and still understand the fight? Well, that really influenced the way I think about staged intimacy, because our connection with breath is just so important. I joke with my BFA students, and you said I could swear, so I'm going to say this. I say that the BFA stands for breathe fucking air. Like, get that breath, get that ease into your body. So it's really exciting to work on a moment of intimacy and begin to nuance it with things that are practical and that the actors can understand, that it's not just, we improvise something and who knows what story we're telling. We can be really specific with it. Or you can have kind of this organic container that it lives within. So maybe the tempo, maybe we're doing intimacy over a musical score, and we do need it to be, the kiss needs to be 2 counts of 8 until the music swells, right? Like there can be that amount of specificity. Or it could be, it's going to be somewhere from 2 to 5 seconds. But if we go to 10 seconds, we're telling a very different story, and they understand that.
Yeah.
It's just as one example. So that specificity of choreography, I think, is really useful to actors to have that container to work within, know that they're working consensually with their partner, and that it is sustainable, and that we're telling the same story. Let's say we're on tour, taking this on tour. We want the people that are watching it in New York City to get the same story as those that are watching it in Texas, right? So to be able to codify what exactly we're doing physically is something that fight choreography has done for a long time, and working with staged intimacy has just started in the last decade.
I think you and I might have talked about the idea of intention when we worked together, and I bring up that word because whether the intention is to push someone out the door or to non-consensually, make a sexual move on them, whatever it would be.
Yes.
These are very different intentions, and per your point, I think bring up different things in different people. For you, separate from just like the literal work of fight and intimacy and the similarities, do you have any fundamental principles or values or pillars that guide your specific approach to intimacy direction?
Yes. Let me think about that. I I kind of have a trifecta in mind of supporting the storytelling, which includes the director's vision, um, supporting the boundaries of the body autonomy or the agency of the actors, and then making something that is sustainable. That word is just so important to me.
Yeah.
And the boundaries, I should say, are not just of the actor. They could be of the text of the script. They could be of who the audience is. That context is so important. I'm going to create something very different for um, Finding Nemo Junior than I am for Rocky Horror Picture Show that's happening at midnight. So there's a bunch of different boundaries that can come into play. Um, and then again, the sustainability of the moment as far as physically what they can maintain, or uh, giving them some tools to make sure that they're able to close out or step into a moment and keep their work life and their personal life, give them that healthy amount of space. And then storytelling, is this clear? Is it dynamic? Are we creating something that's moving for our audience? Is this fitting within the arc of the show in the way that pushes that story forward, makes it exciting? And then I would say, and I don't know if you experience this too much because I was in and out of rehearsal, I think that joy and puns in the room are really important.
Yes, yes, yes.
Maybe not puns, but
I know you're
allow
good with puns. I know how
puns
I
are my thing.
remember. Yes, yes,
Punishment is real. But it's just about, not being so entirely precious with it that we're making it even more serious than it needs to be. Like, we do need to take it seriously, but we are still creating a story. And creating a play, and I think they call it play for a reason. So keeping that joy and ease in the room whenever possible is really important to me as an artist.
Well, first of all, I have my friend Jerzy Gwizdowski, whose name I've looked up. He's the international pun champion of the world, and
I fell before him.
This is a such skill, and he does like some crazy bit where like I guess they give him prompts like use all 50 states in these competitions and like make puns out of all of the capitals, something crazy, and he does it. I don't know, people's brains like that, they're amazing. I'll tell you what this made me think about for a second, Alexis, and it's a story I briefly want that will lead to a question.
Sure.
Very early on in my career, literally about a year out of graduating, I had an amazing opportunity to do a brand new play. It was a very special experience for me. And I had a great theater, and I had an amazing time doing it. And I played this kid who had 3 panic attacks in the play, and I had to have the panic attacks live. And in one of the scenes, I remember the guy playing my dad had to hold me during one of the panic attacks. And in the script, it just said something like, no, 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 no. It was like several no's.
Yeah.
And one night I came in to do the show, and I had got a text from the stage manager to come in early. And full context too, I'm sorry this is a long story, but I swear I think it's kind of helpful for the consideration. There was one night, for example, like when during the panic attacks, where I almost like passed out, like in my own, like in the midst of it. In one of them, I say it because it was really hard for me to regulate that emotional explosion of sorts. And I came in, and the stage manager and the guy playing my dad were on stage, and it was not a good energy. Clearly it was tense. And the actor playing my dad felt, and I'm not saying he was wrong, but this relates to this, that I was doing something entirely different every night.
Okay.
Adding more no's, moving, trying to break free because I was having a panic attack and my dad's holding me. And what are you doing? Don't hold. Now, I was really pissed, Alexis, because in my mind, I'm like, do you know how hard it is to do what I'm trying to do? It's not like I'm just angry, I'm having a panic attack. And, but here's what's interesting. I remember when I think about the process, we brought in a doctor to talk about this emotional and psychological journey of a panic attack in the rehearsal process, but no one ever staged it. We didn't talk, no one ever talked. And I remember, and still to this day, I totally get where they were coming from. He needed to feel like he wasn't holding a wild banshee to recreate. But at the same time, I didn't feel supported. I just felt reprimanded and out to sea with a part that was quite challenging for me.
Yeah.
Long-winded way of making me ask, how do you approach choreography when that goal is emotional vulnerability rather than physical danger? Meaning, how does an actor in a situation like that be set free to reach that point of the effect of what a panic attack would be? Period.
First of all, I kept thinking panic attack because we were just talking about puns. I'm just going to say that. Which you just got panic attacked.
I bet they're like ticks. You got to get him out. I know. I can just tell. Like, you got to get him out.
It's like it's like a laser that keeps building. No. So I'm going to answer your question with a phrase that might not be great, but it depends.
Okay. Sure.
Right. Something I'm actually working on as my next project is co-writing a book about sustainable acting in extremes. So it's interesting that you're asking me about this. And I would say some actors find success. I think there's kind of 3 ways that are coming immediately to mind. Are we going outside in? Are we going inside out? Or do we play the opposite? So I'll start with playing the opposite. I had a choreographer in Chicago was talking to me. He was working on a project with a character that's having a panic attack. They asked him to help stage it. They were actually going to stage it. Well, the act of portraying a panic attack was creating an actual panic attack for the actor, which may have been what was happening for you. And so they decided to play someone regulating a panic attack. So the actions of trying to regulate while being activated still told the story of someone having a panic attack who was being active in their tactics and their objective, right? That happened to work in that instance. I don't know if it would have worked for you in this play.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and I know for some people, for some actors, this is a bit controversial. Michael Chekhov says, you don't owe the audience your soul. And for me, there are times when if I'm able to create a shape, if I'm able to create a tempo, tell a story of inner tempo in a way that is read by the audience and like maybe just the shaking of a hand. If I, and I'm doing like some sort of ringing, or I am basically giving the audience a story without having my entire insides be filled with, quote, the acid, as I like to call it this situation.
Yeah.
Then I'm able to step away from it. Or inside, and that's also a big viewpoints thing, is Barney Hanlon
Yes.
talked a lot about shape and
Barney.
how important that is, and how you don't necessarily need to feel depression, for example, to have your back to the audience upstage and be in a shape and breathe, and they'll fill that out for you as the actor. And I found that incredibly moving as an actor and choreographer. But also there's some creative ways that I might work with an actor in that situation, like have them, if imagination works for them, have them work with something that is so unrealistic but still causes a physical reaction. Let me explain that. So if I need to feel jealousy, and that is something that I don't know, I've had life experiences and it takes me back to them, and I'm getting too much in sense memory by going somewhere real for that, I might just imagine I have a Brillo pad in my stomach and live with what that does to me physically. And then guess what? At the end of the day, you don't have a Brillo pad in your stomach, so you're fine, right? You can just release that eventually because it's just not real. But I don't know. So those are some ideas.
Here's what I think is important about it, without getting into the topic of the play and what it was. It was a very challenging play for 21-year-old me to try to take on and it's interesting in hearing you talk about it because the director was old school, and you know that phrase old school, meaning had no clue what wanted the acid. And yet I do think that if someone on the outside might have been like, I don't think this actor should be pouring out all the acid. I don't think this person is in a place to go to do that. And sorry, not to make it about that play, but it's funny. There was another panic attack where I kept getting the note, don't cover your face, don't cover your face. Well, when you're sitting in front of hundreds of people and just by yourself on stage, having to have this emotionally intimate it's funny, even though this is just by themselves, I would argue this would be a place for an intimacy coordinator because of exactly what you're saying. Yes, it's just me sitting in a chair, but I have to physicalize a panic attack without having a panic attack, and I have to make sure that the whole audience can see it. And it was a wild, it's kind of crazy when you think about it, isn't it?
It is wild. I would say in that case, and I hear what you're saying, for my process through IDC, an intimacy director is very specific to
Right.
like intense physical touching, like kissing, simulated sexual acts, and nudity or hyperexposure. So in that case, I would say from that perspective, for me, a movement director and perhaps an outside source such as a psychologist, or you said you brought in a doctor? Did you say
a psychologist? A psychologist.
Okay. I didn't know if like a real
yeah.
Psychologist, a doctor. Psychologists, don't get mad at me for saying a real
no,
doctor.
No. Yes, no. I should have clarified.
Totally unintentional. But like a medical doctor who works like with people who have experienced body trauma, as opposed to someone working with mental trauma. And there are books about that, like Trauma Stewardship, that talks about specifically doctors experiencing secondary trauma. And I think actors experience secondary trauma. Like a doctor can watch someone else dealing with a wound and feel so much empathy that it activates their nervous system. And I think we as actors can sometimes be so enveloped in our character and our story that we are actually experiencing the trauma that this imaginary character is experiencing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you're doing. And something else you said about the director craving the acid. It made me think of a story of a really talented actor told me once that he had a director that was like, this moment isn't working for you. I need you to, like, basically started to try to have the actor tell him his personal trauma and like talk about like the death of a family member or whatever, and use that here. And he basically just nodded at the director, found something that worked, and then did it on stage. And the director was like, oh, did you use that trauma? And he was like, yeah, sure did. But he didn't, but he just told the director what he wanted to hear because it worked. And he said, it's really, my process is none of the director's business as long as I get it done.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting and healthy.
That makes sense. I mean, again, when you're 21, it was just trying to.
Of course.
I'm not trying to defend, but you're right. That makes sense.
And all this is so much hindsight. Like you're saying, at 21, however many years ago that director was how many
3
years ago in their process. I mean, who knows, maybe they would treat it very differently now, but it's exciting that you're able to look at your younger self with compassion and go, okay, now I have some tools to do that differently. That's awesome. And I think that's what this whole industry is doing, is growing in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then let's just break down, because I want to get into a little more process. So what is, just in a general sense, what is the typical process of working with a creative team to build intimacy to a production?
Well, I do want to say this is such an extensive subject that you could write a book about it.
Yeah, fair, totally fair. Exactly. It's not 3 sentences. That's totally fair.
But it basically, it's funny when Tina and I were writing the book, we finished it and we were like kind of scrolling through it. We were like, oh, more than half of this is about pre-production, which you wouldn't think would be the case, yes. But it really is. That's so important. Like, consent begins at casting, and for me, and it's you you have time where you're telling the actors like what to expect that are auditioning, what the director wants. And by the way, my dog is snoring. I don't know if you can hear
I
it, but it's
can't.
adorable.
I
Okay,
can't. I
good.
love it. Sleep
She's
away, pup.
obviously bored with our conversation. But yeah, so much happens in pre-production for me, if possible. But script analysis, talking to the director about their vision, connecting with the stage manager about what processes will be in the room and what works best for them. Talking to designers, if there's nudity or, different, garments that need to be worn for certain moments, what that looks like. I might check in with the set designers, like, can this wall hold weight? We're considering this, or is this bed going to be like just a hard platform, or what's going to
Yes,
happen here? The big thing is chairs and sofas having arms or not having arms.
of
Oh my
course.
gosh. Because we have like a rehearsal sofa that's like totally, so just asking those questions so you're prepared. Um, and having conversations with the actors. I, talk to the director, I talk to the actors, tell them what the director's looking for, ask them about their boundaries, might have a conversation back with the director about that. And that way we've had these conversations before we get in the room, and that helps to really mitigate, I've found, the urgency that can come into a rehearsal space when we have limited time to just hit the ground running. Like, okay, we know what we're up for. We know what this moment is, what story we're trying to tell. And then we dive in. So that process is usually my process coming up to rehearsals. And then in rehearsal, working in the way that I talked to you about with choreographic details. Sometimes we actually use more improvisation and less choreographic specificity. And sometimes you need to be really specific if it's a little bit more complex, or if there are boundaries that have been shared that I really want to support.
And how do you navigate creative pushback or hesitation from
Mm-hmm.
and I think they'd all come from different places. Directors, actors, or producers, because they're all, I would argue, they might be all have different feelings about it. How do you navigate that pushback?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, there are sometimes, I think that's a couple different questions, but I think there are sometimes where I just let people work through their feelings on their own, because I'm not a counselor. So
Right.
if they're kind of dealing with something, I'm like, okay, well, get back to me when you're ready. I'm supportive, but I don't want to take on necessarily someone, um, people outside of the two actors in it having discomfort with the process. Like, I get it if it's new or whatever. I'm like, though, I'll talk them through it, and then they can work through that. For actors in a moment, something we talk about at IDC a lot is discomfort, and how that should not be a bad word. If we're
Yes.
confident about the moment and we consent to it, we can feel uncomfortable about staging it. I mean, it's uncomfortable to kiss a coworker.
Yes.
It's uncomfortable to stage a moment of physical intimacy. For some actors, it's not, and that's fine too. Uh, but it's okay if it's a little uncomfortable, as long as we work towards comfort through repetition, and they continuously consent to the story they're telling and how they're telling it. Then that to me is pretty normal. So I'm pretty used to that, and have different tactics just to, okay, let's all take a breath, or get, again, throw a pun in, or whatever, take a quick break if that's something that needs to be done. Is that helping?
No, it does. But and what happens if what happens if a director wants to do one thing, but the actor's like, I'm not doing that. But the director's like, I
Mhm,
really want that. That's what I
mhm,
want.
mhm.
How do you play the go between?
Yes. So, that has, again, kind of it depends. So, is this something that, since auditions, we've told them specifically is going to happen? And is, talking about movement over story, can we brainstorm other ways to tell that story that work for the director, even if it's not the most favorite thing in the world? Because we do that as directors. I also direct. I do that all the time. They're like, oh, we can't fit that huge window that's hanging over the stage. I'm like, but that's okay, I'll figure out something else. Or as a
Yeah.
fight director, an actor can't kneel. Okay, well, we can't have them kneel when they're beheaded at the end. Okay, so we have to figure something else out. So it's just finding, is there a way that this will work? And if not, then, they were informed from before rehearsal started. I mean, there are times where there are replacements that happen. That happens also in fight choreography. I think about this example, a couple different things. It's if you are casting the Three Musketeers, and the most important thing for you in the world is that D'Artagnan can do backflips. You really want tumbly D'Artagnan. And the actor says they can, and then they show up and they can't. Well, maybe they thought they could learn it before they showed up at rehearsal. Maybe they used to be able to and they didn't realize they couldn't anymore. Maybe they've had an injury since they auditioned to then, whatever is happening. Do we then say, okay, sorry, we really need someone who can backflip? Or do we say, we love what this actor is doing with the part, and we'll find a different way to tell that story? I don't, it's not a perfect
No,
call,
Alexis,
but
what you're saying is like any other element, it's called creative compromise. If you can't have
yes.
the second level of the set, you got to figure it out. You can't just, I mean, that's the point. By the way, did you, when I was poking around, did you do Three Musketeers with Hassiem Mohammed? Am I making that up?
Yes.
Okay, I'm making that
I
up.
mean, you're talking, that name sounds very familiar, and I loved everyone in that show. It was also like 9 years ago, so I
No. He. The reason I ask is because
it was in Birmingham.
I don't think so. I'm because he's a good friend and he's a physical beast. He did it at Cleveland Playhouse. That's where he did it. I forget.
Oh no, that was oh gosh, I hope I'm saying that was Rod Kenter or Alicia Rodas worked on
I
that.
think it was Rod because I remember him.
Yeah, I got to work with Rod in New York a while ago.
Yeah,
and actually, when I was working with him, I ran into oh my gosh, my brain isn't working. She's SNL amazing. Kristen Wiig was at the same coffee shop, so I always associate Kristen Wiig with. I was like, Kristen Wiig in this coffee shop. Okay, I'm gonna go work with Rod Kinter. It was the best day.
Now, listen. These next few questions I'm going to ask you. You give me honest opinion. I want because I'm as the evolution of this work goes. I'm not trying to poke at it. I genuinely want your perspective. Where do you see intimacy work becoming either formulaic or limiting to creative processes? If you do.
I think, limiting. I think in some ways it is good to have these boundaries in place and to have limits. I mean, if we think about a script, you're given the only words you're allowed to say in the order that you can say them in, and we still could have, we've had thousands of different Hamlets, right?
Yeah.
So boundaries or limiting isn't necessarily bad. I do think that I've had a couple of I've had a couple of actors talk to me about how they had such a positive experience. I'm very collaboration forward, and they love that I was letting it have a certain level of organic nature to a point. And it depends again on the complexity of the moment. But that sometimes I've been in a situation where it felt so step by step and prescribed that it felt robotic, or that they felt like it was kind of like an HR is here moment. And I can't speak to anyone else's process. And I get, again, if we're simulating a sex act, we have to work step by step. Like, you cannot just be like organic.
Yes.
You have to layer that in. Same with complex fight choreography. But I do think that there are moments where, okay, we're going into this embrace. We know that all of my back is a green zone for me, as in I'm like open for you to touch anywhere on my back at a medium to light amount of pressure. And it's not super specific to the story. Like, we don't need to see the hand pause and freeze to tell us a story to the audience. Then I'm going to let the actors work organically through that, and it might change slightly every night. And there's no problem with that for me. So I don't want to micromanage, and I want to trust the yes from the actors. That's a big thing. They're saying they're okay with this. I'm going to let them. I actually worked years ago with a couple. It was an episode. Wow. It was a production of West Side Story. And the two leads had happened to have worked on multiple projects together, and they've happened to have romantic interactions in other shows. And they were very comfortable with that. They were good friends. And so they genuinely like, can we just try? Like, I know this is like a 10-second long kiss while the music swells. Can we just try it? I'm like, we'll check in on tongues. Okay, good. You're fine with that. Okay, then let's try it. And so they improvised it, and you couldn't see a thing. Like, you couldn't tell what was going on. And I'm like, that's great that you're comfortable with that. Now, can we nuance this? We need to see your face. Like, this platform's turning. So just realize one of you needs to be holding on to the edge for safety. Can we have a moment of breath and looking at each other at this point in the music? And they were like, oh, you are useful, basically. So there's different levels,
Yes.
There's times where it's like you want to take actors through it step by step. Because I've worked with actors where they're literally their first kiss is happening in that intimacy rehearsal.
Of course.
And so we are going to work step by step because that's the right thing to do. And then there are other times where, okay, we're honestly consenting and we feel good and we want to try this, organically, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Well, I think, you sort of made a face earlier when I said old school, as we all, I think, do, because I would argue that old school speaks to a homogenization of assumed consent across the board, no matter people's history or triggers and, all of that. And who cares, so to speak. And I just want to say it's interesting. The two areas I find producers push back on when I'm talking to them about shows that I'm directing for them are dramaturgy and intimacy. And interesting, isn't that interesting? That those two pieces seem to be a budgetary annoyance, with the assumption that we can just make it work. Why do I say this? And I'm leading with that, knowing that the answer to this question can go one of two ways. Are there ways in which the field, the industry, or the intimacy work needs to evolve to better serve actors and the art? And again, I'm bringing that part up about the producers because I'm not just implying that the work needs to be different.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to speak for the whole industry on what I think my process with like the evolution. I've gotten over the years less precious in my terminology. So this isn't my language, but there was a New Yorker article that just came out a few weeks ago, and in it, they described like the language being used in a workshop as something like the actors close distance between their mouths. And I support any choreographer that wants to use any vocabulary they are. But at some point I'm like, can we just say the characters are about to kiss? Like, I don't know. So there's like a certain amount of preciousness that I started with, that I've kind of let ease out a little bit, that I think is really helpful.
Can I say something about that real quickly? Just interesting.
Yeah, of course.
There's that story of Mike White with the most recent season of White Lotus when he was. Did you see this season?
No, I've seen 1 and 2, but not 3. But if for your podcast, anything, if you need to say something, and if you spoil something, I trust you.
Okay, well, let me just. I won't say characters. There's a moment when a character is. Well, it's the point of the story, so I'm just going to use jerking off another character. That's what's happening in this scene. And reached over and does it.
Manually stimulating.
Well, so what happened was the intimacy coordinator on set, the actor was saying it, was like walking through this person like that. And this person was like, what? And the director was like, just jerk him off. And the actor's like, yes, thank you. Because the manually stimulating was not stimulating the actor to understand, or even like it was not making sense. Now, again, everybody has different thresholds for understanding. But when you say that, just kiss, it's a kind of similar example, because in some ways what we're getting into is, we'll call it coordination, but it's direction. Fight direction, intimacy
Yes.
direction. And so there's a directive element of this where you're sort of trying to likely gauge with actors what's going to make this clear and effective. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, well, I wouldn't, and I know you're just speaking off the cuff, but I wouldn't say to actors, just kiss.
Right.
But
Yes,
but there
of
are times
course.
where I'm saying, I might use like lip to lip contact if we're talking about a kiss at first, because they need to understand I'm not saying kiss your cheek, kiss your hand, kiss your,
Yes.
shoulder. But I think that you want to keep it a workplace. So I probably wouldn't say just jerk him off, because that's
Right.
not also what is really happening. The actor is going to be simulating a sex act. But I would say, this is the story of masturbation, or or the story of stimulating this other character's penis by, using your hand. I might say something like that. And if they were really confused, I might be like, well, colloquially, we would say this is called, like, the term is like jerking off. You know what I mean? I might start somewhere and move there. But those pre-production conversations are where that confusion can go away, I think. And I don't know what that experience of that coordinator was. But I understand why.
And would you honestly, would you have been, because I would then argue, per your point, if someone like a Mike White does that it sort of undermines the potential work that the coordinator is trying to do within the scene in a couple of ways. Does it make it go, oh yeah, this person's just making it too heady, and sort of make it seem like, put that director in a slightly lesser position? Or does that, to your point, actually make others in the room uncomfortable? And I just want to say, Alexis, and for our listeners, because we talked about this, I really was excited for this conversation, because I'm learning in this process myself about this work. And so I asked you this question because I think there's a lot of free form nature of our industry. Everything's meaning, especially actors, they're naked together all the time when they're changing. People say things, there's a few boundaries sometimes in our work. And when I hear you say that, and even go through the colloquialisms of what you might throw in there to get better clarity, I would argue that could be a moment that could work against the process. But what do you think?
I'm just, it depends. I mean, you gotta get a gauge on the people in the room and what works best for them. And you're supporting the team as collaborators to a point. I mean, there's a certain point at which there are protocols that absolutely have to be in place. Like, we can't have contact between real actors' genitals, and like, we can't have no consent check-in or anything like that. But there is some flexibility within reason that might have worked against that process in that instance. The actor might have been trying to make a soundbite for a interview. I don't know what happened in that particular instance.
Sure.
For me and myself and my process, if a director came in and was like, just jerk them off, I'd be like, okay, yes, we're telling the story of I would support what the director was saying, but also try to keep it
professional. Exactly. That's kind of what I mean, is like, and that's what I mean by creatively freeform, is that that we're not in corporate America when we are making art, and therefore the safeguards that are in place, everyone responds to those differently. And in fact, as I said, when I wanted to bring you on, we went through a process together that I think was uniquely challenging, Alexis. But I actually, and for those listening, we've never actually had a conversation about that process post, which I want to also take responsibility for, because specifically with you, if I may, I think I said I didn't love how, because it was such a fast sort of like smushed together process that
Yeah.
I liked you so much, I like you so much, and I feel like we were sort of like just in the fire and never really got a chance to be like, hi, how are you? So I'm sorry that we never did that, but I would love to actually then just start by hearing your memories of what that collaboration was,
Mhm.
and how the intimacy work was handled, including maybe needing to have been brought on 6 months earlier.
Yes. I mean, that's my first a few things with processes that in general can create challenges is like the timing of the arrival of a designer into a process,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that could be with anything. Like, oh, we forgot a set designer.
Right.
They're here a week before. It's not going to be the same thing that you would get if you had brought them in earlier. I think actors have different levels of being able to learn and maintain choreography of any kind. And I was working on both fights and intimacy in this, and
Mm-hmm.
there are trouble points with both of those kinds of movement. And that is just some actors just, they haven't done a lot of projects like that, or it's just challenging for some reason, which I totally get, happens a lot. And then having a desire for specific moments in a story, that or specific movements, are some things that come to mind. And so the timing, just to back up a little bit, the timing was pretty late notice. Like it
Yes.
was, I think I was called in a week or two before. I barely had time to really speak with the actors,
Right.
and then I had already booked out projects that took a large chunk of the process. And looking back on that, um and knowing how the complexities that came up, I think at that time though, there was like no one else nearby too. So I felt like, part of me felt like, oh, better someone be there for for the
Mm.
process than not. But I really think someone else should have been frankly doing
Mm.
that, who had the time to really spend, because coming in 2 weeks in, it wasn't useful for how interwoven. I think I also didn't understand how interwoven the intimacy was, um within so much of the script. So um that wasn't my normal process. I don't like to puzzle piece into shows. I like to be there the whole time. So that was not ideal. Um and I think all of us discovered that kind of at the same time, because this is still when, I mean, this was how many years ago was this now? 4 or 5? So
What do you mean? It was last year.
what?
It was last year, Alexis.
It was not.
It was
You're
too.
crazy.
It was
My
too.
time. My
Um, but
time.
wow, that's why I don't know if I should be flattered or not that we thought it was so long ago, but let me say this.
Yeah, I didn't think it was 4 or 5, but it just feels like a lifetime ago right now. So
Well, it wasn't, but to your point, and actually I want to say this because I don't know if I ever told you this. I remember when I was first asked to take on the project, we were talking about this. This was my concept from the beginning. I said, this is what I would like to incorporate in terms of intimacy and violence. Do we need somebody? The response was no, these 4 folks will be fine without it. Interestingly enough, pretty immediately in the conversations I was having with them, it was like, well, as long as we have someone there to help, as long as we immediately, which was interesting, I thought. And I immediately went back to the producer and then, and it was already late in the process. But I do want to talk about a specific moment that I'm not very proud of. And I was thinking about it. There was a moment, I'm not sure if you remember, but we were in rehearsal. We were going through one of the quick, like, throw together rehearsals as though we're staging, a slap, which is just not what any of that was. I think it was quite more. And I remember we went into a conference room, and I was like, and I think I was like, I need help. I don't know what's going on. I think I was even like, let them do something. Like it felt like we were at zero. And I sort of felt like I a little bit laid it all at your feet, to be honest with you. And not, I don't mean laid it all at your feet like you were messing it up. I just mean like I remember I felt stuck because I was trying to respect protocol and the process we were implementing while also just needing to get something up and feeling a little like caught in the middle. But I also, but I don't like how I sort of laid that at your feet when you were trying to support us as best you could with the 90 minutes we had, you know, both in terms of our schedule and otherwise. So I just want you to know I apologize for that because I think I could have been much more helpful. But that's actually my question. What could I have done differently in that moment, both in terms of like, including potentially reconceptualizing, Alexis, because to your point about the puns, I want to say something. I really believe in positive, productive, creative workspaces. I don't like creating drama, fights. It's just not my vibe. And so when I say reconceptualize, it's because there's a piece of me that's like, oh, if we're seeing this really is not working, did I need to go back to the drawing board? And how could I have helped in that situation?
I do remember that moment. I remember you being very frustrated. I've experienced that before in different contexts. I've experienced that myself as a director. Again, there were a lot of things, you know, I remember there being a lot of trouble with line memorization and the you know, there's a lot of urgency trying to get up to
speed
the show and
and
just generally not remembering blocking. And I think there was just some things going on that were compounding for you. So I just want to give you some support there.
Thank you.
And to me in that moment, I was seeing the struggle that was happening across the whole thing. And they were also struggling with these moments. And I was like, I think this is a bigger zoom out thing than this particular moments. And so I go back to the D'Artagnan example. I mean, Alicia Rodas, who works for HBO, she says that physical intimacy, staged physical intimacy should be considered a skill set when it gets to a level of complexity, such as sex acts or nudity. And it's almost like, you know, what's on your resume. I'm not going to say I can tap and audition for Anything Goes and not be able to tap.
Yes.
But the actors need to work more at really doing some self-examination of what that they are capable of movement wise and story wise.
Right.
So if I'm okay with being touched on the shoulder, but I am for a story of consensual intimacy, but if it's a non-consensual grab, I as a person am going to get activated. I need to be aware of that before I go into projects. Now, sometimes people don't know what's going to impact them. They don't realize, oh, I'm not going to be able to memorize all these lines or whatever's happening. So I think there was just a lot that was out of
our control
and out of the performer's controls in certain instances. And, you know, yes, sure, you could have reconceptualized. We could have made things stylized and had them at distance and in light, you know. You know what? I could have kept throwing things your way that would have been a change, but at the end of the day, actor boundaries are incredibly important, and director vision are very important. And in a movie, if an actor doesn't consent to nudity, but they want that actor, we have the ability to bring in a body double.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Same thing for stunts in movies. We can't do that on theater. So it just takes a lot more preparation ahead of time about what that's going to be. And then you balancing for yourself what is the weight of that vision. You know, we're doing Othello, and the actor who's playing Othello realizes that when they are telling the story of choking someone or smothering them, that they are so activated that they're out of the play and are not healthy, right? Maybe they didn't know that was going to happen. So do we turn off the lights and make it a soundscape? Or is that so important that we need to recast? You know what I mean? Like, it is there. I'm sorry if that's like too specific of a example.
Actually, Alexis, what's really interesting about this is you're seeing this more in casting notices. In fact, for this production of Streetcar that I'm going to do, we said there would be, and that's nothing new to say partial nudity, but I confirmed in callbacks with people how comfortable you are with nudity. But you're now seeing, I actually just saw one yesterday where it listed all smoking, there'll be a kiss here, there'll be partial nudity here, there will be intimate, like listed all the things in the breakdown for the actor to consider. But you know what? You're the first. I've never heard that. That's the same way you would list. I'm certified in unarmed rapier and dagger. You know, the same way you would say that, and which is a common resume credit. It is interesting to think about if there are intimacy levels to share or consider, or skills that to give more information to a casting team, because just going back to that process we talked about, I was very communicative about the expectation, at least with the performers going into it, and all were like yes, and then per what I think what you're saying, there's some sense of discovery of like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that, and then that's
can totally happen.
Which can totally
and it happens with dance, it happens with fights, it happens with costumes, it happens in so many ways. So then you just start to do that thought process over where is that elasticity of compromise.
Exactly.
And that's totally valid. And I think the most important thing is, again, I'm sorry I keep comparing it to fights. I just feel it's maybe more accessible for everyone. If a move, if a sequence in a sword fight was really hurting my actor, I would take it out. And I think we're starting to understand that there can be some moments of real pain for people that they didn't expect, and where can we compromise on that? And sometimes the best thing for someone to stay healthy is to not put themselves in that position. And I think that's totally valid too. And when I say that, I just want to back up. When I say that intimacy, Alicia talks about intimacy as being a skill set. It's not to say that people that don't want to do staged intimacy are unskilled in any way. It literally is just your path, right? Like, there are things that I am not going to do on stage. There are things that I, at this point in my life I would not want to do on stage versus earlier in my life in different circumstances, different contexts. And it's really challenging. I would find it really challenging to say, like, I'm comfortable with sword fight. We know basically what that means. If I say I'm comfortable with even nudity on a resume, you still don't have enough context to say that. I feel you could be that could mean running through the forest in freezing cold nude. Like, that's very different than
totally fair.
There's a brief moment before the lights go out where your robe is dropping and we see just your back. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know that we're at a point where we can, necessarily blanket statement something like that. But you could say you've trained in it and you have a lot of consent practices in your skill set. And
well, I will say, I find myself now looking for actors who are certified, because actually what you said about the same way that we do with fight, that's very common now. That's become a common practice where people will hire actors who also have fight experience. And I'll tell you why it's interesting to me, and it relates to the last process and even processes looking forward. It's tough when you have windows of work time, right? As opposed to, what if there was what if it was someone who was able to be present for,
Yes.
and so you're seeing more actors, I'm saying this, including, I'm intimacy certified, actually many who came in for this upcoming play I'm doing, they
Mhm.
level 1, level 2, there people are, and it's becoming, what I like about it is it's becoming, and I play guitar, and I, like, there's an element that I think is, and I would argue that it could create a more of a malleable creative base for folks like yourself who come in to work with people who have some understanding and history with the work, because a lot of times I imagine, Alexis, you're having to teach from the ground up, especially some of these,
Oh,
as we
yeah,
say,
sure.
old school actors who who don't necessarily have that experience. But what questions are you asking yourself right now about the future of the field?
What question? Well, before I get to that,
Yeah,
I
please,
do want to say,
please.
because you mentioned certification, and that's a big question in our industry right now for those that um, do the work as a choreographer, and you're now talking about actors who are going through kind of these trainings. And I think just saying that you don't have to be certified to be qualified, but to be a choreographer is something that is important to speak out into
Yes.
space. But there also are the flip side of that, where someone might take a 1 3-hour class and say, I'm ready to be an intimacy director. That's really, really problematic too. Um, and certification for me was important to my path for a couple of reasons,
Yes.
because I really wanted in-depth, long focused training. Like, I did several 3 days, a 9-day training, and then I've been consistently doing other trainings for years, and I will not stop. That's just who I am.
Yeah.
I love being a student, and I love training at an in-depth level. It's kind of like getting another degree at a university. So someone might say, I have this degree from Harvard acting, and you go, oh, okay, that I know I can trust them, but that doesn't mean that someone who didn't go to
Yes.
a training program can't do the job,
Yes.
well. So it's just about, again, that balance, and it depends, kind of a situation.
Well, can let me just say very clearly, specifically to that when several people who came in like, oh yeah, I took a level 1 this, I would say, well, this person is not in a position to lead the work that we need them to do. Meaning,
Mhm, mhm.
I just because someone says I took a level 1 online course for intimacy coordination last summer,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't personally. That's not enough for me. So I do quite take seriously what you're saying. But at the same time, as I'm seeing people who, like yourself, Alexis, let me be clear. You are a true multi hyphenate. You could, you are
Is
some.
pun one of those hyphens? Punner? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But like, if I was still an artistic director, I'd be like, well, let's ask Alexis to direct this play, because not only could she direct Three Musketeers, but she could stage it and like, you have that's what I mean, is like the full breadth of artistry of some folks, including actors. A good friend of
Yep.
mine, Joe Eisenberg, I don't know if you know him, but he used to do at least half the
Thanks.
fights in Washington D.C. But
Mhm.
went to school as an actor. But I want to go back to that question about what questions you have, and what questions
Mhm.
you have about the future of the field.
You know, Maybe it's not so much a question as a hope, which is weird because it's going to sound like I'm trying to get myself less work, which is not the case. But there are times where I walk into a space and, they're asking me to look at a moment, and I'm like, oh, that's blocking, or that's acting. And I'll do it, but I'm like, I want it to become more clear, or I hope it becomes more clear, um, in this specialization, like that directors don't have to have fear, or actors don't have to have fear of working with each other in certain ways. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but I want actors to feel like they can still connect as characters. Maybe there's a basic consent workshop, or they talk about boundaries and things, and then they can work to a certain level safely and sustainably with each other without necessarily needing to bring in an intimacy director. But then there is that level of complexity that I would hope that people in the industry, directors, realize that it is the right thing to do for the actors, for the storytelling, for the physical health and safety issues, whatever's going on, to have that specialist come in. I think I keep talking about fight direction, but over the years that really became clear kind of where that line is. And with that work, and I'm hoping that there becomes a little more clarity in our realm of intimacy direction as well for directors. I feel like it still is a pretty big gray area. Would you agree?
Well, I would. That's why I equate it to dramaturgy actually as well, because dramaturgy, which is sort of I'm just sort of a holistic creative. I don't mean that to be like to make myself so greater than. What I mean by that is simply like I am curious how all of the forms, inform the other. How design plays into what the actors are doing, plays into the history of the play, all of it. So I'm just curious about that. But I do agree, and it actually could feel like the same question. So you could punt it. But what would you love directors or producers to start doing differently when it comes to hiring or collaborating with intimacy professionals? You both, I would say, what you just said is super interesting. Like, is there some sort of, not workshop up front, but something that's more infused into process or coming on earlier? Is anything for you come up though?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had directors consult, ask for a consultation on their season. Like, do you think look at these plays and
Good.
think about the level of complexity of the intimacy, and that can be tricky if you don't have the directors involved, because the script can say they kiss and or they near each other and the lights go out, and then the director goes, they're completely nude and they're gonna make out.
Exactly.
You don't know, the director vision can be part of that, but I think that is so useful in your pre-production analysis when you're choosing your shows for the season. We talk about this in the book, that administrators can think about what resources do we have, what are these, I mean, along with any other design element, do we have the personnel, and do we have the ability to bring on the right consultants or choreographers or whatever for these plays. So that and or being brought on before casting, like that's just the most challenging thing.
Why before casting? Talk more about that again.
So if actors don't know what's expected of them, and they, especially with vision, if it's not in the script, or if they don't have access to the script, and they audition for it, not knowing that there is, something a bit more complex intimacy wise or even fight wise, it's really challenging then once they're cast to be like, and you're cool with this, right? Like that is, then they want to keep their job.
Right,
it's just, it's not good for consent, or they say no or not, and then that is a lot of time and energy that the casting process has put into that person, and realizing that is not going to work out.
So then is part of it that you, the universal you, would be engaging with them, or is part of it no, that you would come on, universal you would come on, and then you would say, make sure you engage with the actors this way to confirm?
Yes. So I'm sorry, I would not I don't think that any intimacy work should be done at an audition. I think you would use a very, very wide placeholder, such as sharing energy across the space or whatever, because again, that's a situation where it's very challenging to have consent when you have that job dangling there. I don't mean that as an intimacy director I want to be at auditions. I mean specifically helping to build a casting notice, if possible, that is clear about what exactly is going on for each character. That works really well in academia. That works really well with regional theaters who have, you have more time to communicate. I think when casting is coming from a casting office, maybe they should just have, or a producer, maybe they should have someone that they can consult with to look at those notices to make sure that they're clear to a certain extent.
That makes sense, especially if it's going to be as involved potentially. I want to come back to this question one more time before I let you go, because and I'll come at it from the dramaturgy angle. I have a friend, actually, I don't mind saying it because I think he said it on the podcast. He co-hosts the podcast with me, Mike, asshole. I'm just kidding. He
What do you mean? The only mic I have is the one on my computer. Come on.
He's like, I don't get dramaturgy. He's like, what is it? I don't want to play that. He feels like it hinders his ability. Like it gets him in his head to worry about dramaturgical facts. Now that's not the point of the conversation. What I do know is it's kind of like when Mikey, what's her name from Honora.
Oh, Mikey, what's her name?
Mikey, Honora.
Oh, Honora. Yeah. Yeah.
But Alexis, there is, as you know, a perception when she was asked about the intimacy coordination, she sort of mocked it. And in fact, I think there was someone on set. I think she, to your point about the Mike White comment, actually came back. And I think while the director, I forget his name, oh my God, it's so bad. While he, I think, did over... I actually don't know the specifics of that circumstance, but that's not even the point. The point is the comment and perception of the role of intimacy in the field. So here's the question I'm sort of going to ask again, because I think it's an interesting one in the midst of this. Because I think what I loved about this whole conversation is, if nothing else, it's truly, at least for me, even better clarified the value and importance of what this work allows for. My partner, who's a filmmaker, always says when he has it on set too, that he really sees it open up things for actors and take away some of the ickiness and unknowns of what it creates.
That's been my experience as well.
But how do we make room for nuance in a field that is more and more so, necessarily so, baked in safety protocols and best practices?
Well, the different reactions I've gotten to the work you're kind of talking about, and I would say 90% of the time, don't get a statistician on me on this, but 90% of the time in the room, there is more ease, there's more confidence. Everyone feels more involved and more creative, and the work goes more quickly than if they were trying to awkwardly figure something out. And the actors have a healthier relationship throughout the process of the show. And then, 90-ish%, right? And then like 5% of the time, there's, we start kind of from a place of shame or tension because, I don't normally do things this way. And now I am, and I've been doing it wrong all these years. And so there's that moment of tension that usually then flows into ease once they get more comfortable with it. And I strongly believe people shouldn't feel shame, because we just didn't. I mean, I did things that I regret now with hindsight. It's way. Let's move forward, right? Let's move forward in a better way. And there are some people that are like, that's not how I've done it. Like that last 5%, like change, like
exactly.
Why would we need that? And sometimes I feel like that position can come from a place of privilege. People who have not experienced actors mistreating them, people who have generally more power or confidence in a space. And is that because of star power? Is that because of agent experience? Is that because of intersection of identities? I don't know. But people who have not felt of lack of agency or experienced extreme oversteps or being harassed or assaulted by their coworkers during these moments of intimacy might feel like it's always been fine. What's the big deal? Because that is their experience, and they're not quite having the open eyes to the empathy for other people that have had, I mean, really horrific experiences, or just really not great, icky experiences. And if we can do a few things to mitigate that, even a few simple things to mitigate that, I'm not sure why that needs to be mocked or disagreed with. It just feels like being a good human. When we didn't realize probably what we were doing, because acting is a yes and kind of thing, and there was a certain like sheen that we would put on, at least when I was an actor. It's like, just say yes to everything, and
You're right, exactly.
and if you genuinely feel that way, that's great. Like, I was very comfortable with staged intimacy, but if I am overstepping on my coworker, I would never want to do that.
Right.
So what's wrong with having a few check-ins, having someone look at it with nuance from the outside? And so I can't speak to their experience in Anora. I know that's been brought up a lot, but I think that if you look at it as some people have had a really terrible time, am I going to be part of that, or am I not?
Yeah, well, and one more thing I just want to say, going back to the point about bringing someone on early, you are such a smart, funny, empathetic person, who's able to read a room and people and work with them. But, I mentioned, A, there are lots of people who are not that. But B, the bigger point I was going to try to make was, just like any director or creative as part of when you're working with a company, part of it is having the time to develop trust and shared language. So there might be processes: is this green, is this red, is this yellow, whatever, that makes sense. But then there's also like, well, what is this room? What is this room? What is this project? What is these actors' experiences, and giving the space to create that as well, I would argue is a big part of the process, which in my brief time with you, I saw you really doing. And what's interesting is, and so I'll get one more thought about this, about kind of our process, but then something you were I think I heard you getting at, which is this. I think from my perspective, in what we went through together, people really did trust you and really appreciated and valued exactly what you brought to the room. Unfortunately, what I also saw happening was it became a scapegoat for them that certain people were using to avoid other elements of the process of the play. If that makes sense, where a scapegoat and or a villain, as though it's that piece of the, and I'm trying to not also vilify individuals, because that's not the point. My point is that, gosh, I'm getting really micro, but there was even a moment when I had to run off and sort of deal with this very thing, and you were like, oh, you just want me to basically stage it, i.e. the blocking thing again, and could that be problematic? Well, we all have to be flowing in a way. All elements, stage management, director, actor, we all have to be there to support the storytelling so that things don't feel compartmentalized, so that it doesn't feel like, oh, and now I do this, so that maybe I could even speak to or notice moments where, oh, that's uncomfortable. I should maybe get ahead of thinking how I could either change that or be in more support of the actor, or I'm noticing them create that as an excuse. What's that about? Is that about that or something else? Is this rambling making sense at all, Alexis?
Yeah. I just think that there was, I hear you with the scapegoating. My experience was seeing that happen with multiple elements in the show, not just the staged intimacy.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair. Oh,
So I
lines,
think
etc.
that again was a zoom out
Yeah.
kind of situation. And again, not saying necessarily this is a correct quote for this particular thing, but there, in working with people who are experiencing an activation of their nervous system for whatever reason, it makes me think about a quote that I'm going to like say badly, and I can't even remember who said it, but like you can't, if you're worried about survival, no art can exist. um it might be an Anne Bogart thing, I don't know, but that if your basic needs as a human aren't being met in that moment, then you're not going to be able to be artistic. And that's,
Mm.
like the Middle Ages, everyone was just focused on staying alive, and then all of a sudden the Renaissance happens because agriculture was there, or what. So why do those things happen? It's because people have that, foundational thing going on. And so I think in some situations where actors have something going on foundationally, it's going to impact the work in every way. And um, as a director, that is challenging to navigate. As an intimacy director, that's challenging to navigate. But the important thing is making sure that the work is sustainable and healthy for them, and whatever we need to do to get there, we do so.
Well, and there's an art to it. I literally called the episode "Intimacy Coordination: The Art and Challenge of Staging Consent," because I do think there's an art to it. It's not going through the motions. Okay, last question. Then I swear I'll let you go because I love this. Where do you see the next frontier of intimacy work heading? Stage, screen, and in education. Meaning, when you say that about the stage manager course, that's really interesting to me. When you talk about already working on the second edition of a book that's been out for a matter of years, that's interesting. Are there more organizations starting up? Is there going to be an intimacy app? I don't know. What do you see the next frontier of this work heading?
I mean, that's so much. You said so many things that I do believe in. I want there to be more training for. Tina and I just have this passion for training stage managers in particular, but yeah, training people that work in all aspects of the theater. That would be really exciting to have more workshops for different designers and things like that. I was at the IDC summit a couple of weeks ago, which is a national conference, the first of its kind, where people from all different organizations came together, and there was a bunch of workshops. And one of them was about the rise of vertical intimacy. And so what that means is people are looking at images and movies and things on their phones, which is a totally different framing.
Yes.
And is a totally different way to look at intimacy.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious about that. I mean, I don't work in film, but I'm just curious about that and how that's going to work out.
Yes.
And that workshop, I was just looking up the name. Jamie Monahan is an amazing intimacy director, and she ran that workshop. And I wish I'd been able to go. I was doing a different thing at the time, but I'm really curious about that. And all the little Facebook clips that have intimacy and some pretty complex intimacy going on. I wonder if intimacy directors are going to work in other industries a little bit more, like burlesque, and I know that some are starting to work with circus acts or Cirque du Soleil, or where else can we go and engage even more with the art form? So that's something that's interesting to me. What about you?
What do I see as the next frontier?
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're saying is a bit more forward-footed. I'll tell you from my perspective what I hope for, what I feel I need, which is I need more producer support. So, because when I bring up things like intimacy or dramaturgy, it's often met with a, that's not something that we can support. And again, the reason why I wanted to do this episode and why I'm relating is because I think in a very basic sense, it has not permeated in a way, it feels like a luxury right now rather than a mainstay. And again, this conversation has been really illuminating for me in a fun way. It makes me excited to work with you again on something that we're something more comprehensive, meaning from the beginning. I think that casting point is super interesting from the beginning, because it's also easy. I'll just take me as an example, because I am hoping for full and partial nudity in this upcoming project, and it's easy for me to say that. I want full. I see full nudity. Okay. But also not just in the conversation of the casting process, but also something that I value personally is pushback, questioning why, what purpose does it serve, what role would it play in the storytelling of it. And I would argue that having someone who understands even more so the psychology, not just of the process of making it, but I would argue even from the audience's standpoint, because part of what you're doing in your role is considering what the audience is experiencing. Oh, you need to put your hand here for safety while you're kissing and turn out. There's this literally the making sure we can see the story. Therefore, I would argue, I'm making this up, Alexis, but if you and I were working together and I said, I'd love to have full nudity, you would probably go, great. What purpose does that serve? Not in even a challenging way, but also good in a challenging way. I think it's helpful, Yeah,
I hear you. I think I would ask, okay, great. What story are we telling?
Exactly.
What are you hoping the audience would feel? Because I hear a little bit of pushback in your mind about someone asking what purpose does it serve, because it feels a bit challenging, or prove to us that this is worth our time. But if we find an actor who's confident with that, and you could say spectacle.
Sure.
I want to shock the audience. I mean, it could be anything. The point of me finding out what purpose it would be to best help create that vision with you.
Yes.
Not really nudity.
Yes.
Because I think especially in America, there's a little bit more kind of tension about things like that. And I don't think it needs to be like that.
Yes.
But if I, as an audience member, see an intimacy director on the program and there's nudity in there, I'm like, oh, that actor was taken care of. And now I can sit back and watch the show with confidence, knowing that, I know I have a specific perspective as a choreographer, but or as a fight choreographer, oh, they did that safely. I don't need to worry that anyone's going to get hurt.
Exactly.
So it's things like that are just so nice.
Which just to say that's true for that's true. We all know that it could be an actor standing on a wobbly table. If we, the audience, are going, we're not going to watch the story. We're going to be stressed by whatever we're experiencing. So even if there's danger in the fight or the intimacy, knowing that it's in good hands, even somewhere probably deeply in us as an audience, we can better just take in the effects of the story without needing to be worried for that person's safety or well-being.
Exactly.
Okay, we end every episode. I didn't tell you this, but we end every episode with something called comfort.
Are you surprising me now? How can I consent, Joshua?
That's totally fair. You can say no, but we end everything with a comfort food performance, which is basically just a favorite performance. It could be a performance you come back to, or something you've seen that you really loved.
Gosh, I wish I had more time to think about this. So I'm a person who, I have a lot of people, they'll go see a show in this industry, and I feel like they come back and they're like, oh, kind of nitpicking. I love watching theater. I love so many productions, for different ways, for different reasons, in different ways. And I just don't have I'm not saying across the board people like this, but have you noticed a little bit of cynicism sometimes? Because you're
Sure.
You're peeking behind the curtain. You know what's going on, right? I'm able to still step back and just get lost in a story in a way that I really appreciate. I don't know how that happened, but um, I guess I'm going to go to my go-to that immediately popped up. But again, there's just so many, and especially working at a university, to see the students grow and watch them in productions has been some of the most joyous times of my life. But when I was in college myself, in undergrad, I spent a semester in London, and we went and saw The Pillow Man by Martin McDonagh,
Yes.
starring David Tennant.
I saw the original. Crazy.
Yeah. Were you there too?
Well, I saw it. Well, was it in England? I saw it in New York.
Oh, you saw it in New York with
yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, who was in it?
Jurassic Park.
Oh, yes.
I'm so hot.
It was
Jeff Goldblum.
Yes, and he was, and you know who was also in it that blew my mind in that production, that when it was introduced, was Michael Stuhlbarg. Amazing Michael Stuhlbarg and Jeff Goldblum. Yes, but it was amazing. But yes, I know the play well.
Incredible. So I saw it with David Tennant, who I had no idea who that was.
Yes.
Actually got him to autograph I bought a copy of the script and had him autograph it because it was just so amazing. And it's funny to call that comfort food because that's a really, really dark show, but it was just so beautifully done and so moving. And it's something I still think of as an inspiring piece of art. It's complex, it's dark, it's imperfect, it's I don't know. So it's something that a performance that I still think about.
That's a great one. Well, I'm on the fence between All in the Family, which I started watching again recently, and I recently watched Robert Altman's Three Women, which is a weird play that a very, very young Sissy Spacek and a very, very young Shelley Duvall, of odd impressionistic film, but it's really interesting and twisted, and a beautiful. I love Shelley Duvall, who doesn't, and I love Sissy Spacek, and they're both giving some pretty special performances. Alexis,
amazing.
I thank you so much. Again, for the listeners, busiest person in show business, I'm telling you. So we're lucky that she gave us our time.
I promise.
I really, this again has been really great for me, selfishly, just to because I had so many thoughts and questions I wanted to ask and share, and I feel like you are so thoughtful and giving and considering of all elements and all angles of what this work is in this moment, which I think speaks to why you're so good at it and why you're so in demand. So thank you so much for your time, Alexis. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. And I just love that there's a podcast about actor sustainability. It's that is one of my biggest passions and areas of research, in general and moving forward. And it was exciting to learn more about this project and how many amazing things you're doing. And I would say that to Mike, but he decided not to show up.
Exactly. Asshole. That's what we call him, was the asshole. Thank you.